From NJ.com and the Heldridge Hotel, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights. With your host, Steve Pikiell, and Rutgers insider Brian Fonseca. Let's start shopping.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Rutgers Rant, a very special edition of the Rutgers Rant. Today, we will talk to Keli Zinn, Rutgers athletic director, our first chance to get her onto the podcast. Brian, I was thinking about this, and I tweeted it. It is remarkable to me how much she has done in a little bit of time. And I went back and I put it to see exactly how many days. 217 days she's been here, just over 7 months. I mean, there's changes in every aspect of the athletic department during that time.
Yes, and I liked how you coined it now as Zinn bombs. We're going to be having a lot of Zinn bombs around Piscataway. I wonder, when you think about this, is this Keli Zinn being, an exceptional athletic director, or was the bar to success so low from the previous administration that her doing things that any competent AD would do seems like it is, above
or
and beyond?
Both. I mean, the answer could be both.
The answer is both, is what I was going to say. Yes, I think Keli Zinn has shown herself to be a great hire so far. We will see the results of these things, a few months, a year in advance. But so far, I think she's made every right decision, at least in the big decisions she's had to make. And she's kind of put her stamp on the department through, whatever it's been, 6 months?
Right. Yeah. 7 months. Yeah. And the big announcement, we will ask her about this because it was an important announcement that kind of gets overshadowed because I think the eyes gloss over with internal stuff, but forming Scarlet Knight Enterprises, I think that shows that they now have something structurally in place that a place like Clemson has, that a place, the bigger powers have, that Rutgers just didn't have. A more professional, situation, a setup to raise the NIL. And the fact there's so much optimism about that part of it. I'm interested to ask her just about if it exceeded her expectations, what she's been able to do with NIL.
Yeah, and she brought Oliver Luck, who was the athletic director at West Virginia that hired her back to her alma mater, has a long relationship with her. And he created a similar situation at Clemson, right? He built their infrastructure up this way, and now he's going to chair their board and help them navigate and create this at Rutgers. So certainly positive. I think the details are the details. That we'll probably never know all the details, and your brain would probably explode trying to figure all this stuff out, as I'm sure Keli's is to a certain extent. But the big picture thing is here that Rutgers is doing what big time athletic departments do. They're putting themselves in position to raise the money, to be able to utilize the money with their NIL marketing agency that's part of this situation, right? They're going to be able to funnel money from sponsors and create content, whether that's interviews, whatever they can, do within the framework of, rights and all that stuff that you have to navigate. So we'll see. Again, we'll see how the execution of this goes, but Rutgers is trying. Rutgers is in the game, and that is something you could not have said for the past 5 years. And look, they absorbed Samco now, right? So Samco was a thing. They had semblance of this, right? They had a third party managing their rights. So the pieces were there, but now Kelly's taking that to the next level and further professionalizing this.
Right. Another example of what big boy athletic departments do, fire on underachieving coaches, which is what Keli Zinn did this week with Coquise Washington. We talked about it last week on last week's episode. It's a message to the department. I think the people inside that and the fans outside as well, that we're not gonna stand for this level of losing. Like we have to be better than this. And I think it was important. I think her statement about that was important. She's going to have some interesting decisions coming up with basketball and football. We're going to ask her about both of those, of course. Obviously, a much higher profile deal with both of those. This was a good test run. I'm just curious to get her thoughts on where this basketball team stands and the football team. We have not been able to ask her about that yet.
Yeah, that's it's going to be the great part of having her on the Rutgers Rant, and hopefully she enjoys her time, and hopefully we get some insightful answers because she's very thoughtful, and we'll see how much more informed we are at the end of the show than we are now in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot of topics. I'm just curious. It was, you've been around her a lot. You've seen her in action. Like what has impressed you the most about her and in your interactions? And has there been anything that has kind of surprised you about, when you've had, conversations with her?
She's very impressive, very persuasive from what I understand. She's never really trying to persuade me of anything, at least not yet. I don't have any NIL money to donate to the university, but my understanding is in speaking to donors and people around the community, she's very persuasive. She's very personable, and she's really getting along with a lot of people the university and building goodwill, but also she is serious. She's serious about turning this athletic department around, the way she manages the athletic department, the expectations she puts out there. Obviously, externally, as you said, we've seen that with the coaching decision. That's an outward sign of we will not stand for mediocrity here. But, my understanding is it's happening across the board in the athletic department, and she's really trying to implement things I'm sure she saw in the SEC, the commitment it takes at all levels to be successful in the Big Ten, and you've heard her coaches say that as well. I've grown to like Keli. Getting to know her and her story, I've learned to appreciate it, and I've grown to like her. And I think I'm sure most people that listen to this podcast have heard her speak before, but I don't know if they've ever seen her speak to us. And I'd like to think we're a little bit charming. So hopefully the people that listen to this will come out of it feeling better about her.
Her toughest test yet as Rutgers athletic director. An appearance on the Positivity podcast, on the Rutgers Rant. Coming up next, we'll be back in just a few seconds with Keli Zinn. All right, we are back with Keli Zinn, athletic director at Rutgers. Keli, I put this in here. You've been athletic director for 217 days. Longer or shorter? Which one does it seem like for you at this point?
Yeah, well, I stopped counting, so that's a good sign. But on some days it seems longer, and on other days it feels like I just got here. So either way, it's been a fantastic 200 plus days. So I'll take it.
We know how busy you've been, so thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Good to see you guys.
Nice to see you too. Very busy, as Steve alluded to. A lot of things to talk about here with us, but I just want to start with kind of the more pressing question, and a question you haven't been asked directly yet. Is Steve Pikiell going to be back next year as your head men's basketball coach? And if so, why?
Yes, Steve Pikiell will be back next year, and a combination of reasons for that. I talked a little bit about it, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago. And when I had the opportunity very early on to take a look at the investment in our roster and what that looked like, I went into the season, even before the preseason rankings came out, saying to myself, one of two things will happen. We'll catch lightning in the bottle and have the best investment that exists from a talent level, or we're going to struggle. And unfortunately, it's been the latter, but I can't say I was surprised by that. At the end of the day, there is a certain benchmark that tends to correlate to your ability to recruit and effectively retain talent. And we had some work to do in that space. Thrilled to share that we met that goal. And so we're going to be in a position here once the portal opens up to put Coach Pikiell and his staff in a place to see what they're really capable of. And I believe he deserves that chance. Certainly when you look at the win-loss column, it's not where we want to be. He doesn't want to be there, but I think they've got really good plans in place. I was thrilled as I've been able to take a closer look at it as to what they're looking at and what they're expecting. But more specifically, I do think in a number of instances, we're pretty close. And so certainly I've watched a lot of basketball, and in some cases we came up short, but there was enough there to say, let's make an investment in it and give them another year.
Does that put premium on next year? Does that make next year a prove it type year for him?
Yeah, I think Steve would say that he has a lot to prove next year. So certainly we're expecting to see progress there, and we're both excited for it.
Keli, you've talked about meeting the goals you guys had for NIL. I'm not sure if you're willing to tell us what those goals are, but I guess how did that happen, and where do you see that goal matching up with the rest of the Big Ten teams you're competing against?
Yeah, I won't share the exact number, but I will tell you that it was aggressive, and we were probably half of where we should have been in the current year. Certainly, you always project for where you want to be, and so we had quite a bit of work to do really early on, and we started that immediately. It wasn't just about basketball. Football had some deficiencies, and then of course our Olympic programs really had nothing that they were really working with. And so you all know that you saw with the launch of our NIL and some of the things that have transpired, but the way it's done is getting in front of both current corporate partners, but more specifically new corporate relationships, and seeking their support and helping them to understand that student athletes and the Rutgers brand collectively has some real marketing potential. And they leaned into that at a time when they could have been confused or not understanding the landscape of college sports. I was thrilled with what really quickly said to me, there are people out there who want to support this and are willing to get in this space. And so we capitalized on that. I had a goal that I had set for January 1 with myself and our team, who's largely responsible for that area. And when January 1 came in, we had exceeded it by a multi-million-dollar piece. And so that was significant. At the time, we could have said, okay, well, we've exceeded our goal and we've got a few million left to give. And instead we said, let's increase the goal. And so we set a new goal for April 1st. And I'm feeling really good as that date's approaching that we can close that gap. And so I would say where we're at now, we feel really good. The key now is sustaining that and making sure it continues in the future. And I believe that it will, both based upon the conversations we have, some of the things that are in the hopper right now that have not yet closed, but are trending towards that, and discussions that are already taking place for FY27. So I'm thrilled with that piece. It's arguably the biggest source of progress that we've had and been really well received by all parties.
Kelly, I'm sure everyone would agree that the resources, the money is the most important part to rebuilding this program in basketball specifically. I'm curious, we saw it with football where also staff changes were necessary, where decisions that were difficult were made. I'm curious if you look at the basketball team and see the same things, if you will talk to Steve Pikiell about making some changes in his staff, in his philosophies that might also improve the results.
Yeah, Coach and I have talked about everything relative to the program. I don't want to get ahead of the season coming to a close. Certainly, there's going to be a time and a place for him to take a close look at that. But he's looking at a lot of things, not just personnel. I know he's committed to putting a great product on the court next season, and we feel really good about it. And so we'll see how all of that shakes out.
I think there's some curiosity, Kelly, on your part in that, in staff changes and changes around a program, whether it's football or basketball. How much of a say do you have? How much, not pressure, that's the wrong word, but how much do you tell these coaches they have to do this versus kind of having those conversations and letting them ultimately make the decision?
Yeah, I certainly have an opinion, but I've been thrilled with what the relationship has been with all of our head coaches. I talk with them individually. We also meet collectively as a group, and those have been really well received. I think when you have the opportunity to bring everybody together to a table and talk about what's going on across the country and the landscape, but more specifically what exists here at Rutgers, there's some health and strength in numbers and sharing and supporting one another and looking at, in some cases, the pitfalls too, and figuring out where we need to improve up on. But everybody here knows at this point, I'm going to have an opinion, but at the end of the day, you're the head coach of that program. And there's an expectation that you have the capability to effectively serve in your role. If it comes to a point where I'm starting to have to dictate or heavily influence, that's usually an indicator that something's not right. And that's not the relationship I want with my coaches. And I doubt that's the type of boss that they want to work with. So it's been really healthy. And I'm thrilled with that piece and how it's all come together because I think we have a really, really good working relationship. One that's built on a lot of trust, but also really honest conversations. The biggest piece surrounds the expectations. And that is in my purview. And I tell them what those are. And then we talk about whether or not we feel that's attainable. And is it easy to get there? Is it difficult to get there? And if it's the latter, what's standing in their way? But it's important for me and our team that we support our coaches and our student athletes in a way where we eliminate or at minimum mitigate obstacles for them to be really successful.
Kelly, we haven't seen you or talked to you since the end of football season. I'm curious how you felt about 5-7 overall and missing a bowl game with that program.
Yeah, it was tough, right? And I think everyone felt that way. There were a number of them that were close. The Penn State loss was heartbreaking for a number of reasons. And so certainly at the close of it, I don't think anybody felt good at that point. What we were able to do and had already started doing it was figuring out, okay, now what is the path forward and what needs to happen to get there? And I think we've made some progress in that space. Bringing Travis in and seeing that come together here in recent weeks, I'm super encouraged about that piece of it, and I'm hopeful we see some really good progress this fall.
You obviously had a big impact in adding to the resources NIL-wise for the program, and that was the results of that were through the portal. I'm wondering what your thoughts were on the portal haul and how the football program attacked that aspect of the offseason.
Yeah, I think when you looked at the retention side of it, certainly we're able to lock up a couple guys that were critical to get back here. Did it work out the way that we would have hoped to see in all positions? No, we probably ended up a little short there, but I also think there were some factors that played into that. That we've now been able to spend some time on, and I'm hopeful won't be an issue for us in the future. But all in all, I think it was a good step forward. I think you'll see some really good development this offseason. We also need to find ourselves in a place next fall where we're really healthy, and we've spent time on that, because that piece in particular, had we had more health and depth in the fall, that might have been a difference between one or two of those games. So it's been a focus in totality, one that I have no doubt we're going to continue to improve up on.
Kelly, you were there with KJ Duff when he was celebrated by the Rutgers crowd for staying, and I think that's a significant moment. Obviously, he was a very highly coveted player, best receiver you guys have had in years. What was the pitch to him from you, and how involved were you in that process in making sure that he stayed put?
Yeah, it was a collective effort for all of us to work with him, but not just KJ, right? He wasn't alone in that effort and support. But the biggest thing was, and what I'm so pleased about is it mattered to KJ to be a part of this, right? I think his priorities are in a really, really good spot, but he cares deeply about Rutgers. And that's what you're seeking, right? You're seeking really great talent, but also a commitment from them that transcends what they're doing athletically and pursuing their craft. And I think when you find young men, and certainly young women too, in the other programs, that have a gratitude for where they are, but a desire to make it better and be a big part of that, it resonates with them. And so I think KJ has a really good story to tell in the future. I've just been so impressed with him. But there's also an element of it that, yes, he knows his value, and he knows he has marketability. And there was a gap there in resources for him and others that we had to fulfill. We did that. And I think we sent a really good message, even in those places where maybe we fell short of getting a certain guy or a position locked up in the way we had hoped, that now the world kind of sees and understands, particularly those in that space when you're dealing with agents and firms and all those that are now a part of our business. They recognize that it's a new day at Rutgers. And I was able to speak directly with some of them. You have really great and pretty powerful firms in some cases that's in that space. And when you have an agent who tells you, wow, you've made a ton of progress there, and that they themselves are going to do their part to help others understand that Rutgers is now found themselves in a really competitive place in this, that's powerful. And so I'm grateful to them too. And I think we sent a really good message that things are different and that we have the resources to compete with some of the best.
Progress in the NIL space is obviously hopefully conducive to progress on the field. This program has made 2 bowl games back to back, 1 game short last year. Is this a year where Greg has to make a bowl game or show even better results to similar to what we asked you about Steve Pikiell, is this a year that you would like to see that program take a step forward?
Yeah, and I don't want to get into you got to win 8 games or 9 games or any of that, and instead just say it has to look better, and I believe that it will.
Kelly, I guess along those lines, and it's funny. There's such an arms race to raise money in this space. I don't tell you. They'll have to tell you that of all people. You see reports Ohio State's $35 million. Indiana won the national championship with a budget that's going to be even higher this year. I'm just wondering, how do you get Rutgers to a place where it can dream of competing with those teams? And is it possible? Is there a ceiling on where this can go based on what you've been able to raise money-wise so far?
Yeah, there's an element of controllables and uncontrollables. And while I don't want to put a ceiling on it, there are, and there's one particular factor here that's forever going to create some real pressure on our revenue, despite our ability to be successful competitively. And that really surrounds premium. You guys know this because you spend a lot of time in our venues. But if we were to go out and make a college football playoff here in the fall, and I've got a donor calling me and saying, I'd like a luxury box for the 2027 season at football, I can't sell him that. We don't have it. Or if you're seeking, additional club spaces and premium that a lot of people have become accustomed to, particularly when you're in a professional market and some of those things that exist, that they want those amenities. There's only so much you can sell for a bleacher seat or a general seat that doesn't have that type of amenity and experience for our fans. And so we're going to have to make a decision in the near future what that means for Rutgers, right? Because it is a significant investment when you start renovating or bringing in new brick and mortar. But if 10 years from now we don't make that decision and we're in a really good spot competitively, there's only so much we're going to be able to sell tickets for before we price people out for what they're getting. And so that's a piece that people need to recognize. When you look at our revenue, ticket revenue, and then even some of it that's attached to that donor and contribution column, that's going to be low in part because of what we're up against in our peers. We're the only stadium in the Big Ten that does not have a luxury box that we can sell for football. The only one, right? It doesn't exist anywhere else. There's a reason for that. But in some of those other categories, to a certain degree, you control your own destiny. And when it comes to corporate sponsors and to a certain degree, the philanthropic donor space, we've got to do better there. We are, right? The NIL piece alone tells me we can be, really successful, particularly in that corporate space. And you're going to see that continue to be a big push and focus for us. So it's a combination in the future of increasing our revenue, which I feel confident we will. And then in some cases also reducing our expenses. You got to be careful with that piece because you don't want to harm recruiting and you don't want to harm competition. But admittedly, there's some excess here that's not, making a difference on wins and losses that we're addressing for the next fiscal year. And then the other piece surrounds kind of some of our business practices and how we're purchasing things, right? Are you working directly with a distributor or going to the store and buying it on, an Amazon or an Instacart, right? And so those things add up when you're dealing with 740 athletes and 310 plus staff. And so you'll see a different type of business activity from us next year to be more efficient.
A lot to go off there, a lot of interesting things. You say make a decision here soon as far as facilities. Is that exclusively renovation? Is there an idea, a new brick and mortar, whether that's a football stadium, a men's basketball arena? Just when you say make decisions, what exactly do you mean? Yeah,
right now we're focused on renovation. And when I say soon, my world of soon is a little bit different from the world of the design work and diligence. And, as Yes, as you can imagine, and I love my guy who sits in that space, but it's often that he and I will look at a timeline and I'll say that's got to move more quickly than that. So when I say soon, it probably is every bit of the next 8 to 10 months is what I'm told. We're going to do what we can to see if we can have some clarity before then, but these things take time. And right now, the focal point is more of a renovation than something brand new. You start trying to build a brand new arena. In the case of basketball, you're probably every bit of $500 million into that. Football, you can look at what just happened at Northwestern and how much they spent. It's really, really expensive. But the initial intel and some of the folks we've been working with, I've been pleased to see what is capability both at SHI and Jersey Mike's. Now we need to learn, is what they're seeing as capability in those spaces actually feasible, and what's the cost look like? And that's the work we're doing right now.
You made a change at women's basketball, your first significant decision in that way. Just curious what you'll be looking for in a new head coach for that program, and why you think that program, besides tradition, can be one of the programs you invest in to win.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking for the same thing that any AD across the country is looking for when they make a change like that. And that's someone who can recruit at a high level, who can win, but can also support the growth and development of young ladies who are here to grow and develop as basketball players, but also as people, and provide great mentorship. Someone who supports the academic component of it, and also someone who does well within that donor and corporate space. You won't see me burden our coaches with that piece, but as I've told them all, and the new head coach will hear the same thing, my job and our team's job is to get these things across the finish line. But in those instances where they'd like to hear from a head coach or they'd like to have that relationship, I need you to feel comfortable in that space. And so there are a number of factors that go into that. I feel really good about where we are. And separate from the history, which is really impressive, there's a number of other reasons for that. We've talked about the progress we've made in third-party NIL. We will share some of that pot with women's basketball. We're healthy right now from a revenue share standpoint in that program. They did receive a portion of revenue share dollars for the current year, and that's going to continue. We're going to increase it from a third party standpoint. And I believe the commitment that we're making to that program is comparable to what you see across the country in order for people to be competitive. And then even though we've talked about the deficiencies at the arena, those are really fan and experience deficiencies. And when I say experience, we have a tremendous game day atmosphere that I'm not concerned about. It's the concessions, it's the restrooms, it's the the premium, all those things. It's not harming our ability to win. You've got an indoor practice facility that's among the best in the country. I was super impressed with the APC the first time that I toured it. And every time I'm over there, I get more impressed. So when you look at our investment from all the things that go into a successful program, and whether that's nutrition and marketing and medical and academics, we really are in a really healthy place. And so it's a great job. I know that we've struggled here in recent years, but I think you can see the trajectory of that program turn really quickly. And the key, again, and always starts with recruiting at a really good level.
Kelly, are you going to look to poach a sitting head coach? And a somewhat related question, have you been making phone calls back to Baton Rouge these days recently?
Well, Brian, I'm aware that you have offered up to wear any top of the line Queen of Sparkles exclusive piece. That's fantastic. As much as I hate to dampen what I'm sure are thousands of people waiting to see you do that in the future, we're not going to hire Kim Mulkey. I'm certain Coach Mulkey is in an incredible spot at LSU, and as much as we would love for her to make her way north, I just don't think we're going to see you in an exclusive Queen of Sparkles piece.
Kelly,
Maybe we can do it anyway.
No,
I think we could. I know a gal, and
I've spent probably a year's salary worth on that stuff already.
Who knew, Steve, that Brian had such a love for sequins and bedazzling things? I'm really disappointed that I'm not looking at anything in his background that would capture, that love and passion.
You learn something about him every day. It's true. It's true.
Remarkable.
Yep,
I'm a fascinating guy. I got to invest more in my background for sure. I was convinced that you could take that clip, that 2-minute clip, just send it to every donor in the Rutgers universe, and you'd have $1,000 from all of them by the end of the day. You'd be able to pay your buyout by the end of the week.
You have sold yourself way too short, my dear. I mean, that would give a much higher dollar, certainly.
Speaking of real fundraising, you did make a very big announcement this week that we want to make sure you get a chance to talk about Scarlet Knight Enterprises. I'm curious how this changes the structure at Rutgers, and does this make Rutgers closer to a professional franchise than perhaps it's ever been?
Yeah, it's not unique across the country. Certainly not everybody has gone down this path, but there are a number of schools that have done so. And to a certain degree, Rutgers started down that path with Samco. With that said, and I've kind of shared with folks, you can look at it a little bit like Samco being the startup that had a really good foundation and opportunity to bring your media rights in-house. And start to control more of your revenue, but then being bought out by a more robust, more aggressive, actively seeking, efficient enterprise / business model in order to take it to that next level. And so this really kind of started with the evolution of our NIL. As you can imagine, when you seek to bring in-house what was an infrastructure of a true marketing agency, and then you layer that with 8-figure goals and what that amount of revenue looks like, structurally, Samco, while we probably could have done it, it was a better model for Scarlet Knight Enterprises and the way that it both functions and its capability as a nonprofit and some of those things to allow us to do that effectively. But it wasn't just about NIL. That certainly was the piece that caused us to start to look at that model. When we looked at everything in totality, it makes a ton of sense for Rutgers, not just how we're working structurally, but more specifically what we're seeking to achieve. And in this case, there are a number of things with it that are really positive for us to maximize our revenue.
You brought Oliver Luck over to chair the board there. I know you guys had a long-term connection when he hired you at West Virginia. And I know he did something similar at Clemson. I don't know to what extent he helped build out that infrastructure, but how does that experience of what he did there, how much value does he bring with that experience and knowing what works in this space?
Yeah. It's significant. And he has been involved in a number of these from a consultant standpoint across the country of helping athletic departments find their way into that space and doing so really effectively. Oliver, and certainly, he hired me many years ago at West Virginia University, and he has been the brightest business mind that I've ever been able to share space with, right? And whether it's infrastructure and building a new baseball stadium, which we did at the time, and saw a ton of success in at West Virginia, or advising a lot of folks across the country in really high level organizations on revenue generation and the various paths that you have to get there. He comes from a professional background and had a lot of capability in that space. Very, very bright mind. And so you pair those two things together. I could not have selected someone better to serve as our chairman, particularly here out the gate, to get it in a really good spot. So what you'll see now is we do have additional board seats that we're seeking to fill, an additional 3 externally. Again, similar to, kind of what we saw with NIL. I'm thrilled with the conversations I've had in that space with prospective board members. And I think that also is going to show the optimism that people have in our future and what we're capable of to surround ourselves with some really, really bright minds and effective people to help us get to where we want to be.
Obviously, all this means more hires, a CEO, new people there. I'm curious, in a world where every time a deficit pops up, it makes a big headline. Will there be cuts? Is that the other side of this, or are you confident that this will raise money for itself here?
Yeah, at this point, we're well exceeding our expense in new revenue. So in a perfect world, right, you're not finding yourself in a place where you're having to eliminate people's jobs and all that. Instead, what we're doing is strategically taking a look at things and through attrition, do you fill that job or does it look different? We are looking a lot as well about quantity versus quality. And in some cases, you can find yourself in a position where you operate with less bodies, but maybe they have more experience. Maybe they have a stronger skill set. And so that's going to continue to be a strategy as we move forward. I mean, you could see that for the foreseeable future, years ahead. But right now, I feel good about not having to, right, unless we choose to make personnel decisions that are going to devastate people.
Kelly, you've been great with your time. I know you got to run. I have one really quick follow-up. This is not exactly due to revenue, but we've seen like Iowa State this week drop women's gymnastics. A number of schools have dropped sports in the recent past because of the increasing cost of college sports. Is cutting sports at all something Rutgers is looking at given the deficit, or how do you kind of view that possibility?
Yeah, it's not. Again, I think the best path forward at this point is more revenue. And that's what we're focused on. If there comes a day and time where we don't feel good about that piece, then we're going to need to take a look at a number of things. But for right now, I'm pretty optimistic and bullish about what we're capable of with our revenue, and you'll continue to see that be a priority.
Awesome. Kelly, we can't thank you enough for coming on and talking to us. I know this was the hardest thing you've had to do in the 217 days you've been here, but we appreciate it from the bottom of our heart. Thank you very much, and we'll see you down there at Jersey Mike's.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, take care. All right, we're back. I mean, I got to tell you, you can see why people who encounter Keli Zinn are leave impressed by Keli Zinn. From the very moment we started talking about her and the people around her, I mean, look, I think the proof is right there.
She's smart. She's funny. She can roll with the punches. She can make jokes, and she's very serious and clearly thinks about a lot of things and a lot of things deeply, right? She's juggling 1,000 balls in the air, and it seems like everyone she's giving deep, long consideration to everything.
Yes. Aside from getting you in purple sequins, which was my first big takeaway, she listens to the podcast, Brian, or at least someone told her about this, or maybe her crack PR staff. You guys know who you are. Fed her that one. I can't. Either way,
she's smart enough. There's no way she's smart enough to not waste time listening to us talk, but she's smart enough to have someone else listen to us talk and get her notes back. So.
Yes. Or maybe she puts it in AI. Either way, she knew that you look good in sequins. No Kim Mulkey though. Oh man, I thought we had at least another week to bang that drum. It's over. I don't think that we knew that wasn't going to happen, but now we officially have that word. If you're looking for breaking news on the podcast, Rutgers will not be hiring Kim Mulkey.
But they will be retaining Steve Pikiell. Two bits of news items that, yes, most people who look at the situation logically could get to those conclusions. But Keli Zinn, we got her to say it on the record, which is always good to get that confirmation.
Hey, the rumors are still out there. Look, I mean, she has not. We joke about this. For people who might have heard the question, why are you asking that? Isn't it obvious? Every time I go on the internet, it's like, oh, he's on a 50-50 hot seat, maybe. Is a possibility? I don't know. So there you go. Put it to rest. End it. That's it. Bang.
Correct. And my takeaway was this didn't seem like a long, hard, discussion or thought. It seemed like this was always headed this way based on, the revenue they had to work with last offseason and the revenue they expect him to work with this next offseason. Obviously, there is the elephant in the room of the enormous buyout. If Steve Pikiell had the same buyout as Coquise Washington, we'll be having the same conversation. Impossible to know. But ultimately, Rutgers did not have a lot of revenue to work with. They did not have a miraculous season where they outplayed their spend by $1 billion. And now we have the expected result where Steve Pikiell will have an offseason to prove himself.
Yes, Keli Zinn went into the season like the rest of us did, right? She looked at the roster. She went, well, maybe. I mean, if everything goes right. But everything did not go right. I think she knew it wasn't going to. So here's someone who's not surprised by it, who's not angry about it. I think that's a key thing, looking at it very clear-eyed. And I mean, she's not going to. She's smart. She's too smart to say, it's NCAA tournament or bust, Steve. But clearly going into this offseason, I think she expects him to, A, spend the money she's raised really, really well. And B, be proactive about her staff and what she wants to do next, his staff and what he wants to do next. So we'll see what that means. She's not going to demand changes. I think that was an important question to ask, but I thought she gave a good answer to that too. I mean, if she has to do this, if she has to be, micromanaging your job, it's not working already. 100%.
I thought it was a great answer because it is things that people have talked about and speculated about. Is she going to walk into that room and demand, she can't fire the guy because of the buyout, but is she going to demand that he changes things structurally? I think it's an excellent point because if you're at that point, it's kind of like, when you're headed toward a divorce, it's coming, but you kind of just got to live out the last few days. So it sounds like what she said matched what Steve Pikiell told you, where he's going to evaluate everything. Obviously, what happens after the evaluation is the key part, but at the very least, they are cognizant that there's a lot of things that need to change. And it's just a matter of what they will change.
Right. The other thing I want to talk about here, and like if we had an hour, I could have spent the hour just asking her, how'd you raise all this money? I come back to it all the time, and I don't want to make it seem like we're glossing over it because this is the most important thing. When she just comes out and says, yeah, we set an ambitious, aggressive goal for January 1st. We exceeded it. And now we're continuing to go like anybody who follows Rutgers closely. Like, if you've been around this for years, and I'm not talking just Rutgers athletics, I'm talking Rutgers University about raising money and the historical problems that this university's had coming up to raise money. The previous athletic directors, like it has been an issue forever. I just think that's just a remarkable statement. She's in there confidently. She says we've got more deals in the works for 2027. Yeah, and along those lines, she also talked about what's holding her back, which I think is interesting as well.
Yeah, and she had important context there, right? Where Rutgers does not have premium seating in its two main venues, and a lot of the reason why Rutgers is so far behind the rest of the Big Ten as far as donations is that the donations people have to make to get those seats in all these different schools counts towards that number. Nebraska, before they sell a single ticket just on premium seating donations, makes more money than Rutgers does as an entire department. And I thought she had an interesting the note that Rutgers is the only football stadium in the Big Ten without a premium luxury box option is insane. I had an idea it was bad. I didn't realize it was that dire.
I didn't know that either. Yeah.
And the clear not emphasis but the urgency to fix that problem. 8 to 10 months they'll have an idea of what they want to do. But I think clearly, if it is feasible, barring it being infeasible, you got to update the football stadium to add more premium seating. You have to update the rack to some extent. Maybe premium seating, definitely the bathrooms and just like the ticky tack part of the experience that you have to wait 30 minutes at halftime to use the bathroom or whatever. But clearly, she's aware of those issues. It's now a matter of making it feasible and raising the money to do so because it won't be cheap.
Yeah, and that to me is a really interesting 2026 into 2027 benchmark for her, because there's been no shortage of feasibility studies. The nation once wrote that Rutgers led the nation in feasibility studies. I mean, obviously, you have to do some of that work before you do work. But now we're gonna see if Keli Zinn can, make significant changes to a building that, just got air conditioning a couple of years ago. If she can do things to the football stadium that will pay for itself in a way that makes a difference. If we walk into that building in 2030, is the press box side suites? Is that changed in a marked way that we can, that it's a different facility that raises money? I think it's kind of fascinating that's something that we haven't talked a lot about, because there's been so much other stuff going on, right? Like she had to rebuild the entire structure of the athletic department, essentially, hire all these people, deal with raise money, that has slipped down to, 4, 5, 6 on the list of things that are important, but clearly not off her radar.
Yes, it would have been nice to have like Keli Zinn or someone with this mentality 10 years ago, when the burden wasn't so much on raising money for players and all these other things, where upgrading the stadium and the RAC could have been a priority. But I think you're right that we're probably not going to be in that press box for many more years. It's one of the only areas I can see. I'm not an engineer or anything, but there's not many other places where you could put premium seating in the stadium unless you build a second level around the corners behind the end zones. I guess that's possible. But and the other thing is that, she didn't exactly rule out a new brick and mortar stuff, but clearly the cost and the time it would take to do all of that just does not seem worth the squeeze, particularly at a program that is losing so much money. But I could see the RAC expanding, the outdoor part of the RAC expanding to some certain extent. You know what I'm saying? That's probably the only reasonable way that could happen.
Yep. Some other nuggets, explaining why she believes that women's basketball is not lip service, as to why she thinks it's not just, hey, we were good in, 1982, we should still be good. With women's basketball. She's going to put money there, and already did put money there. And I we didn't ask it, but I get the sense there's some, hey, look, we invested in this program, and look at 1 in 17. That's why it's not good enough. Clearly, she expects to have a competitive player salary there. Makes a big difference. That was interesting. That's a little bit of nugget. What did you make of that?
Yeah, and I think she's absolutely right. And you can make up some of that. The gap in the investment with getting more butts in the seats, right? Just the attendance numbers have been terrible, and I think she recognized that. Much like you got to spend money to make money in rebuilding the arena and the football stadium, you got to spend money on the program to get people into the seats. And if you succeed in that, the money makes itself back, many times over. So I think she's smart there, and I think she didn't answer the question of whether she's going to look for a sitting coach, because I distracted her with the Kim Mulkey situation. But I do get the sense that that's where she would ideally go. Someone who knows what it takes to build a program. I don't know if they're at a point as a program where they can just risk it on a hot shot up and coming assistant. You want someone who's been in the seat, knows what it takes, and can quickly rebuild this program.
Right, exactly. Some other nuggets. She talked about the situation with football's portal hall, kind of acknowledging that maybe couldn't address every position as they had hoped, which was interesting. I think, I don't know if that factors into expectations for next year or not. She didn't say that, but it was interesting.
I appreciate her candor, right? There are many athletic directors who would pump up what they thought of the portal and smooth things over, or say it more diplomatically. And I appreciate her saying that, they didn't achieve every goal. And I think it goes both ways, partly in retention. I'm sure they would have loved to retain Ian Strong, a guy like Bo Masco or starters on either side of the ball, but they also didn't fill every position, right? They didn't get a stud defensive end or any of these other, a wide receiver to replace Ian Strong, etc. But I appreciated her candor, and I also appreciated her take on expectations. She didn't say they want 8 or 9 wins, but she made it very clear it has to be better. Now, It has to be better. Does that mean 7 wins? Does that mean more than just making a bowl game? Clearly, the bare minimum expectation, which she didn't say, but we could kind of suss out, is you got to make a bowl game.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be very interesting. And this is one takeaway. One thing I've been thinking for a while, and talking to her today kind of confirmed it for me. If we are sitting here on March 4th, 2027, discussing where this is at, and those two teams do not have good years, it's going to be interesting to me, like, just to see what the attitude is, what the changes are going to be. And it's going to be a difficult situation for her because she's got those two massive contracts for both of them. Established figures in the community, Greg Shannon especially. Yeah, and I think that's where this is headed for Keli Zinn if these teams don't do what she's hoping they're going to do.
Yeah, well, she got a 1-year mulligan, right? Like reasonably, you give them a year where you had nothing to do with the money raising, and the money raising wasn't enough. But now you have 1 year sample size. Next year you'll have 2 years of a sample size, and you'll have to make a real decision, a real tough one, right? Because there are justifications for, again, like you said, if we're in the same situation a year from now, there are real justifications to go either way because it's not nothing to eat $16 million or $20 million. I think that Greg would be owed, but you can only let things go the way they are for so long before you make a change, right? So I think this year clearly there was no real decision to be made with either of these programs. And again, women's basketball really wasn't a decision. You kind of had to make that move. Next year, like you said, assuming things don't change, that will be the first real time that the rubber meets the road.
Hopefully we'll talk to her many times before then because she was a great guest. Hope you guys got something out of it. Any final thoughts, Brian, before we sign off?
Yeah, I just want to kind of quickly dive into the story I wrote this morning. Deep dive.
Oh, yes, let's talk about that. Yep, absolutely.
Offensive philosophy of the basketball team under Steve Pikiell. A team. I talked to Miles Dredd, who played at Penn State for 5 years, 6 years. I have it in 5 years, 6 years. Sorry, whatever. Read the story. You'll find out what the real number is. But he played Rutgers 8 times, and he played them during the peak of their powers. He didn't play them early in Steve Pikiell's tenure or here at the end where they've been sputtering. He played them at the peak, and he put into words what I think myself and a lot of fans thought they saw with their own eyes, which is that this is a team that does not run a lot of sets. They go very hard on winning one-on-one battles, trying to create mismatches. They take a lot of mid-range jumpers, and they're old school, right? Like he said, they have an old school ideal in the way they run the offense. So I have a shot chart here from CBB Analytics just to kind of for this season, which is kind of the crescendo of the issue where they are in the 99th percentile in mid-range jump shot attempts. They take 13 per game, 12.9, 13 per game. Tariq Francis, their lead guard, is 24th nationally in percentage of shots he takes when he's on the floor. So they lean heavily on their guard. And then the issue here is that Rutgers does not have what Miles Dredd called monsters on the inside that attack the glass like they're playing football for an offensive rebound. So that to him is his thoughts of the offense. And I looked at the numbers of the amount of mid-range jumpers they take, the amount of threes they take or don't take, the lack of shots at the rim. And what I found talking to people, analysts that watch the Big Ten very closely with an analytical lens is that the way Rutgers plays offensively, even if they have an elite defense like they had for years under Steve Pikiell, they've had 4 top 20 defenses, 3 top 6 defenses. Even if you play at that elite level, the way they play offensively, you basically have to be perfect to be able to be elite, or else you're shooting yourself in the foot every time you have the ball.
Right. Yeah. You should read it if you haven't. It's a good deep dive into it. A well-sourced story, except for one person named Steve Pikiell did not want to talk about it. What happened?
Yeah, Steve Pikiell just didn't want to sit down for the story. I requested him multiple times. I attended a practice, and he just didn't. He did not want to answer questions, which is his right, And frankly, in fairness to him, I'm not sure if there's anything he could have said, any justification he could have given that would have made this, justifiable. And to a certain extent, he talked to you about it after the Nebraska game, a game where they shot more mid-range jumpers than threes. They shot 8 shots at the rim that game.
Right.
And he said, if he looks at it like this, if you don't shoot from mid-range, that's 40% of the court that the opponent doesn't have to guard. My rebuttal would be, I don't think teams guard that area anyway. They want you to shoot from there, right? There's a reason that they have a lot of open mid-range jumpers. It's because they, thank goodness, every time they take those shots. I asked Buzz Williams, the Maryland coach, about what he sees in Rutgers shot selection in their offensive philosophy. And it took every bit of constraint from him to answer that question diplomatically because he likes Steve Pikiell. But clearly, he said Rutgers knows how it wants to score, and it takes those shots accordingly. Something to that effect. The quote's in the story. Right. But what he's trying to say is like, they don't take great shots. So
yeah. And this, obviously, I think this is the biggest thing. Frustration I hear from fans, and I got a lot of texts this morning like, wow, what a great story from people. It's like, hey, thank you. I didn't write it, but thanks anyway. I'll take it because I do think that it is an important topic, and we're just not. And we asked. That's kind of what I was asking when I was asking Keli Zinn about that. It's like, how much do you get involved in this part of it? Like, you can give a lot of money to this program, and that is the biggest thing. Like, we all agree. No, we're not like you run in a more efficient offense with inferior players than the other team, you're going to lose most of the games. Like, this is not naive, but I think it is something that is just beyond throwing money at this problem. Like, and that, I think that's, to me, what this drives at in a lot of ways. And I'm curious, very curious, to see how much Keli Zinn, who's been courtside, who's seen it, who knows basketball. She said today, I've seen a lot of ball. Like, she's not, she kind of, like, she gets it, how much of an influence that's going to be for her in this situation.
I think they will make changes to the assistant coaching staff. I don't know who, I don't know what. I would be very, very surprised if they run it back entirely again. I think the more important and interesting question is, who will they bring in and how much influence will they have? Very similar to the question with the GM. Like, I don't expect them to bring in an offensive guru, right? One, I don't know how many of them there are out there. And two, I don't know how, I guess it could be attractive if you give them carte blanche. But I think they have to add somebody, and it's going to be a matter of how open they are to expanding their horizons and playing basketball from the last, 15 years.
We've got some clarity. So they've got 2 games left in the regular season at Michigan State. 94% chance they're going to lose that game based on what I saw analytically. And then home at Penn State. If they beat Penn State, they are out. They are out of the Tuesday night drama in the Big Ten tournament. The other scenario is if Northwestern loses both of its games, then they play Purdue in one of those games. So
Rutgers has to be better or equal to Northwestern in the stands. In theory, Rutgers could beat Penn State and still play on Tuesday if Northwestern beats Purdue and Minnesota. That's not going to happen, obviously. But the point being, Rutgers has to win as much or one more game than Northwestern this week. If it beats Penn State, essentially it locks it up. And we'll know by Sunday because Northwestern plays its last game Saturday. But that's really it, I would say. I think the numbers right now are 74% Rutgers plays its first game on Wednesday, a.k.a. gets a bye. But no way of knowing for sure until, assuming they lose to Michigan State, assuming Northwestern loses to Purdue, the last 2 days of the season will determine it.
You'll be back after both games for your post-game show on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that. We'll both be back after both games on Monday to talk about heading into the Big Ten tournament, probably on Wednesday for your travel plans. I hope it's Wednesday. Otherwise, hey, thank you to Keli Zinn for joining us. It was great. Much appreciated. Thank you to the Rutgers Hotel for making this possible. And thank you for all of us, for you guys for listening. We appreciate it. We'll be back next week.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant, sponsored by the Rutgers Hotel. Head to nj.com/Rutgers for more Scarlet Knight content.